Dear friends, good morning or good afternoon. I don't know. In my point of view, it's good morning, but maybe for other people. Welcome to this meeting. Thank you for to be here, because for us, for our group, is very important this possibility to open the debate with the civil society, with the people who are involved and who are working in issues important for us, like equality rights, like sexual and reproductive health. As you know, we are here at different groups for the European Parliament. I'm with my colleague Malin Björk, that will speak after me. And of course, we have a different position in other issues, but we can work and cooperate together with a very important topic for us as a sexual and reproductive health and as a women's rights. This year, we want to introduce the question about education, sexual education, and to have the possibility to know what is the position in different countries, and maybe the possibility to exchange the best practice and to know if we can improve the situation of the education in different areas and in different countries. When we work in the FEM committee with different reports, we try to introduce the gender perspective in all topics, and for us, maybe there are other people who think that it's not European competence to speak about the sexual and reproductive health or about sexual education, but for us it's very important, because one of the most important values in Europe is the equality, and if we want to have more equal society in Europe and to build other equal societies out of Europe, I think that it's necessary to speak about these policies and to introduce a legal mark in all Europe to guarantee the equality and to guarantee the access for the women to the education or the health service. For this reason, we organized this meeting to listen your point of view, to open the debate. And of course, if you have any suggestion to give us, this is our responsibility. As a member of the European Parliament, we have to listen, and we have to speak with the civil society to know what is your opinion, and if we can introduce different proposals in the European Parliament, of course we will do. Thank you for to be here. I hope that you can enjoy for a good debate, and it's the moment to begin our work. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Irache. And my name is Malin Björk. I'm from the Swedish Left Party, and we are organizing this seminar as a part of our work within the All of Us network, which is cross-party with several colleagues, as Irache said, from different political groups. And you will later hear from the groups in the Liberal and the Green group, and we are from the Socialist and the Left group here. And the reason we want to have this seminar about sexuality education, it's like Irache said, it is one of the pillars of progressive SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights policies. And some of you might know that in the end of last legislature, so 2014, there was a report that we tried to push through the European Parliament, but it was voted down. We failed, and it spoke about women's and men's rights to sexual and reproductive health and rights. It spoke about abortion rights, it spoke about trans people's rights, it spoke about sexual education. And it spoke about many other things also, but these three were very controversial in the end when we came to the vote. So the abortion rights, we are fighting for that. We're an abortion rights network, all of us. But we also fight for the broader spectrum of sexual and reproductive health and rights. And sexuality education, a little bit to my surprise, I'm from Sweden. I got, it was so attacked. It got so attacked in this report. People were like outraged that we propose that every young person has the right to sexuality education, and a comprehensive one that is non-judgmental, that emphasizes consent, gender equality, LGBT. For us, it was something very, very important as one of the cornerstones of our work in this field. But that was one of the most contested parts of this report. And this is why I think we need to do a lot more work on sexuality education. And we need to build a stronger alliance in order to push this agenda forward. It's a matter of every young person having the right. And it's also a question, if we speak about looking forward, if we don't get this right, I think we might have problems in succeeding on all the other rights that are linked to this area when it comes to sexual and reproductive health and rights. So with those words, I want to thank my colleagues organizing this, our advisors that have been putting this together. And I also want to thank IPPF and Irene Donaggio for being our moderator. IPPF is collaborating with us and is a very strong partner in everything that has to do with SRHR, Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, here in the European Parliament. And I thank you for that, Irene, and I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Irache, and thank you very much, Molin. Of course, I am delighted to have the opportunity to discuss this crucial issue with you. And I think that's hard to underestimate the importance of sexuality and relationship education today if we look at the incredible, intense debate we have had recently on sexual harassment, on Me Too, on women and sexual violence. There is a lot that brings it all the time to our attention. And I think what is also important in this particular discussion is the fact that, yes, it is the value of the European Union to promote gender equality, but in practice, not enough is done. And certainly not enough is done in schools to ensure that everybody, girls and boys, can really develop their full potentials and build very strong and healthy and happy relationships. And I wanted to show you a message that's key to our heart as IPPF. You can see it here, and that's really looking at the price of inaction, at the price of cowardness, at the price of being too afraid of social pressure or political retaliations. Because what we do if we don't discuss sexuality and relationships is that we abandon our children and our young people, that we are not taking our responsibility. And we definitely hope that the European Union, the European Commission, the European Parliament and the Council will face their responsibilities towards the new generations as well as the boys and girls and women that are living in Europe today. I also wanted to underline, before giving the floor to our fantastic panel of speakers, there is an incredible international agreement. You've seen the WHO has adopted an action plan on sexual and reproductive health rights that puts comprehensive sexuality education in the spotlight. The Human Rights Commission of the Council of Europe is also supporting comprehensive sexuality education and relationship education. UNESCO has just issued guidelines. UNFPA, WHO, and the German Federal Center for Health Education, they also have issued policy briefs on this topic. We have plenty of research. We did a big research ourselves, IPPF, with the German Federal Center for Health Education about the status quo on sexuality education. Even the European Parliament has carried a fantastic piece of research about best practices and the principles that should underpin sexuality education and the value to protect young people from sexual violence and sexual abuse. And still, it's not enough. I mean, what else do we need? How many other documents we need before action is taken? I hope that for the parliamentarians who are here and the parliamentarians who can see us through the web streams, that you will make this a priority for the manifestos of the next elections, because young people deserve it. It's enough what we had to stand until now. So let me, of course, stop my passion and give the floor now to Hans Olsen. Hans Olsen is a trained teacher, coming from Sweden. He has been working for 25 years on sexuality and relationship education. He's coming from RFSU, which is the leading organization, non-governmental organization, working on sexual and reproductive health and rights in Sweden and around the world. And I'm really honored to give him the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks being invited here. And I sound so old when you say like that, and I am. Anyhow, it's uncomfortable for me as a teacher to sit down and talk. I prefer to stand up, but I have to sit down. But next slide, please. Yeah, I will just give a short brief about sexuality education in school in Sweden. It was recommended 1942 by the parliament, and it became compulsory in schools 1955. It doesn't mean it was good at that time, but it was there. And but the first document, the sex ed classes we've seen is from 1897, actually. So we have a long tradition. But I will not speak so much about that, about the history. We will look forward, and I agree with you, Irene. We already know what a good sexuality education and relationships education is and what it requires. It's nothing mysterious in a way. But we will start with a very practical thing. So we will show a film. Then you have to go back to the film. I will show you a film that we are using, that a lot of schools in Sweden are using. It is produced by RFSU, and we call this the Gorilla. It's a short film, just 2 minutes. So you will see it, and we will discuss it. Yes. Oh, that's the wrong one. It's the wrong one. Sorry.
Sounds
It's the wrong one. It's but you can watch this as well. It's that one.
That one?
Yes. Life is full of surprises, you know.
Hallå?
Hallå? Oj, 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 vilka modeller vi hade här då.
Stelt. Ja, men hur går det med franskan då?
Jag har skrivit lite orsakerna till franska revolutionen då. Ni vet.
Hallå, har du tränat eller?
Ja, men jag har väl deffat lite.
Kan du inte ta av den?
Tröjan?
Ja, du tar pattarna. Nej, skoja.
Ja, men.
Jag gorillan.
Gorillan?
Ja, varför inte?
Vadå, tänder du på det eller?
Nej, men jag gorillan bara, herregud.
Och ta av dig t-shirten också.
Ja, men kom igen, var inte så pussig.
Men vi ser lite, du ser fett musklig ut.
Ja. Kolla vad kul.
Kom igen, gorillan. Låt som en gorilla.
Och högt och tydligt.
Bra så.
Kom igen. Kanske borde träna lite mer. Men du kanske har något annat som är stort?
Hörni, jag måste dra nu.
Men vi skojade ju bara, förlåt.
Ja, men jag måste göra klart franskan.
Nej, men det var inte meningen.
Okay, I would like you to just discuss this for a couple of minutes with the person you're sitting beside. Just okay, what is your reactions? What are your thoughts about this? What have you seen? Okay, take 2 minutes to talk. Yes.
Or you want me to show that or not yet? The gorilla, not yet?
Not yet. There.
Like this?
Mm. What do you think?
I think it's if you're empathic, I feel very bad. Really very bad. Shameful. Embarrassed. I think it's good to that people discuss it. That people discuss it is a nice way to put it in a way that is not male-threatening.
Sorry, time over. I hope you can share later your impressions. Let's go back because we are on web streaming, so we want also to discuss.
Yeah, but could we have one or two comments from someone who voluntarily would like to share the thoughts? It would be nice.
Yeah.
Me and Jad, we like the idea of putting a man actually as the male lead and destroying the idea of toxic masculinity, or showing that guys can also be fragile and that it's okay to feel bad about something. It was something new, something unusual, and I think we both appreciated the idea.
Thank you. One more comment. Someone? Yes, please.
I guess the video is also a good starting point for a lot of things that are happening in our society right now. The fact that peer pressure leads to taking decisions you might not agree with. The fact that a lot of these decisions are also linked to digital technologies, that you will more easily do something digitally than you would do it face-to-face. And I guess it's a good way of showing how our actions in the digital sphere and in the current society is really, as my colleague said, getting dehumanized away from the actual sexual experience to human bond. That's what we were discussing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're right. You can take next. Thanks. Yeah, so this is some kind of questions you can actually ask after watching this film. And discuss how do you think the guy feels, why doesn't he just switch off the computer, and those kind of things. What some students says is that, oh, maybe he is in love with one of the girls, and that's why he also actually accepts to let them cross his boundaries, so to say. Of course, we can talk much more about this. We can take the next slide. And I will just give you some examples. We have made like 6 films, and you can watch them at Vimeo or YouTube. But it's about boundaries, expectations, to discuss gender with a focus on masculinities. And what we wanted to do is also to promote good communication. This was bad communication in a way, but I mean, it depends on how you, of course, follow up the film. But we have other films also that are showing good communication. How do you know? How do you show that kind? Okay, next slide. And this is also a part of being reality-based, because, of course, CSE, Comprehensive Sexuality Education, has to be reality-based. And we also wanted, when we made these films, to be to don't work too much with rapes and that kind of things, because sometimes when you talk about sexual violence and harassment, it becomes very, very severe. And if you're 14, 15 years old, you might not really identify with that or recognize that kind of situations. So we try to be more in the gray zones, talk about nagging and that kind of things. But we have to be reality-based. And what do we mean by reality-based? Yes, it is to accept that young people are accepted as and respected as sexual beings, and having a kind of sexuality can be expressed through different things, of course, through thoughts, not only actions. I mean, thoughts, questions, fantasies, and actions, of course. We also have to realize that some young people have had sex with others, with a partner. it has to be based on young people's living conditions and how they actually live and what they do. And also accept and respect the different experience they have. And we always have to take a stand. Okay, who do we have in front of us? And of course, youth participation is crucial. And see young people as competent. That is also very crucial. Next slide. And we need to talk. We know that gender is also fundamental to talk, to include in sexuality education. And also because sexuality, gender, and relationships are omnipresent in school. Not only in sexuality education, it's there, in the corridors, in the schoolyard, everywhere. It's in the teaching, and not only in the sexuality education, it's also in the general teaching. How students, staff, and teachers relate to different things like vocabulary, what words do you use, and what words do young people use? Sexual harassments, and how do schools act on that? How teachers treat boys and girls, non-binary people, etc., etc. And also how we include sexual orientation, or how we identify the students as beings, not only in the sexuality education. We need to have an inclusive approach in all senses. And how do schools treat students who fall in love? All that kind of things. So we need to have a gender and norm-conscious perspective. And norm-conscious perspective is to analyze the norms who restrict and affect people in a negative way. Next, please. And to discuss these kind of things with the students also. I mean, this is how we express gender, but also what we need to discuss in sexuality education. And we can do that in different subjects. I will come back to that a little bit. And very briefly, gender equality is learned about, through, and for. I mean, we need to know what we mean about gender and gender equality. And we learn about that through equal expectations on girls and boys and others and everyone in between. Also including sexuality and relationships, etc. And we do it for a more equal society, of course. I will go back a little bit to norms and masculinity. This Do You Want To films is dealing a lot with gender. And I think we have missed a lot when it comes to discussing masculinity. Sometimes gender becomes an issue for girls or for women. But of course, we also need to discuss men and young men's approaches, behavior, thoughts, etc. And we also know there is we know that the majority of sex crimes is committed by men. But there are also research that show a clear link between gender stereotype norms and the tendency to use and accept violence, all kind. And this is both violence to men and women, but also men and women who have a more stereotype perception of gender. So it's really important to question and reflect and work on main norms. And I will just show you one norm. I mean, we have this conception of boys or young men or men driven by a kind of natural biological urge. I don't know if you agree with me. But it's very interesting because normally self-control is a male virtue, but not when it comes to sexuality. Suddenly you can hear that, well, a man who is excited start to think, with a small head, not with a big head. And these kind of approaches are actually dangerous because it excuses harassment, it excuses risk-taking. Because boys will be boys and that kind of stuff. I mean, of course, life is not easy, but I mean, these excuses are actually dangerous. So we need to question these kind of norms. And I still hear this. I don't know what your experience is. Yeah, I will just give you a couple of examples from the Swedish curriculum to also be concrete. How we, I mean, we have several more examples, so this is just a few. It is really integrated in the Swedish curriculum, sexuality education, and I would say the key words there is identity, sexuality, gender, gender equality, and sexual orientation, and so on. And it should be from start in school. So it should be about life issues of importance, right and wrong, friendship, gender roles, gender equality, and relationships, already in primary school. And also daily moral issues, this is in religion, related to identities again, and roles, gender equality, sexual orientation should be there. Also talking about exclusion and violation. You can read yourself there. I will also give you an example from the biology, and in grade 1 to 3, when they are 7 to 9 years old, should talk about body parts, their names and function, and grade 4 to 6, human puberty, sexuality and reproduction, and also questions about, once again, identity is interesting. We could talk one day about identity, of course. Gender equality, relationships, love and responsibility. So it's there. I'm very quick. Am I? Am I too quick?
No.
Okay. I will just say a little bit about the new international technical guidance from UNESCO on sexuality education. It was released just a couple of weeks, 3 weeks ago or something. And it's a revision from the guidance from 2009. And they have also updated the evidence for sexuality education, and actually it reaffirms earlier findings. That is reduce risk-taking, it increases the use of condom and contraception, it has positive effects on knowledge, attitudes and behaviors. It shows that abstinence-only programs are ineffective, and the right-based approach has positive effects. And also that gender-focused programs are substantially more effective. That is new, that we have more evidence for that the gender perspective and the gender component in CEC programs are necessary. And the difference also from the old guidance is that this is more less focus on risk-taking and more focus on the positive approach to sexuality, and also a more clear gender focus, and also more rights-based. So there are some differences. And I would like to stress that sexuality education is a subject like other subjects. Sometimes you hear it is so sensitive, it's like it's a mysterious thing, but it's a subject like other subjects in school. It should be treated as that in school. It is a knowledge-based subject. It's the same didactics. When I'm a teacher, I always ask myself, okay, why, what, when, and how? And of course, it requires trained teachers. When we also talk about it as a sensitive subject, we also make it sensitive. Of course, there are things that is more complicated than teaching maths, maybe, but maybe not history. It's also very sensitive in many ways. So I would really like to stress it, to start treating CSE as a subject like other subjects in school. It doesn't mean that sexuality is the same thing as mathematics in life, but in school. And it's, of course, a cross-curricular subject. This is just a picture to show all the things that you can bring up in sex education, and also in what kind of subjects it could be included. And do I have 1 more minute? 1 more minute. 1 more minute. I will just say a little bit about LGBTQI, and we need to include that, of course. UNESCO made a study a couple of years ago, and it's called Out in Open, or a report more. And we all know that LGBTQI students experience much more violence than other people. And it's more likely in schools than at home or in the community. So we really need to address this, of course, and because it also have effects on education and well-being in general, but also the education, like absence from school. And we could talk a lot about this. But it's also a link here, of course, between gender norms, especially masculinity norms, and stereotype norms, of course. So there is really a link between these. And we plan international, also included more about masculinity norms and also LGBTQI issues in their programs with their partners. And you can see a big reduction in prejudices. It's amazing how big differences there are. So I will just say something about approaching these issues. Sometimes you discuss in school, okay, is it okay to be gay? Never do that. I mean, what we should discuss is, of course, integrate it in all the other stuff when you're talking about partners and love and relationships, etc. But if you want to discuss this more specifically, then we should discuss why it is so difficult for many gays and lesbians to be open, or LGBT, I mean, queer or non-binary, etc. And how could we support a friend who are non-heterosexual? And what can we do to prevent, like, homophobia? So then I will just conclude, or just send you my missionary message. We also need to think about that sexuality isn't a medical problem that has to be solved, but a part of our lives and humanity, with all its complexity of joys and sorrows, happiness and disappointments. And that also need to be considered when you plan sexuality education. So we don't really just talk about risks or bad negative consequences. So, thank you.
Thank you, Hans, for being so concrete and to the point and really addressing very specific and important aspects of sexuality and relationships and the challenges that young people face and what they need. I was curious to ask two questions to the audience before inviting the next speakers to join us on the panel. First of all, I wanted to ask you, how many of you have had some form of sexuality and relationship education in schools? Could you lift your hands, please? Or you're lucky. You're lucky. So that's quite a number. Actually, at my time in Italy, the only sexuality education was the guy sitting on the last row looking at pornographic materials, magazines mainly, and discussing porno movies. So I'm glad that a lot of you had something a bit better than that. And just before I give the floor to get a sense of the expertise and experience in this room, can I ask how many of you, we have many young people here, and I think there are many who are actually talking to other young people, and I guess that some are really already doing sexuality education with their peers or in schools. Could you lift your hands to let me know if you're involved in any attempt to educate young people and children and others? Well, it's still a discrete number, so it's great to know that we have a lot of practical experience in the room that we can discuss later. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce our next speaker. Sorry, because I have put away all my paper. So it's Antonina Lewandowska. She's coming from a very interesting country, which is Poland. And she is a young advocate for sexual and reproductive health and rights, very brave and very strong.
Thank you, Irene.
She's a sex educator, a feminist, and an activist. So I want just to add that she has been the co-founder between 2014 and 2017 of the youth group, the Tematy, sorry for the horrible pronunciation, yes, in Polish, which is a member of Ponton Group of Sex Educators. And she's, of course, interested in peer-to-peer education, in fight for sexual and reproductive health and rights in Poland. But also, she's the NGO server of the Health Committee in the Polish government. And I think it's important because she can bring the practical experience as well, the exposure to the politics around sexuality education and gender equality in Poland. Such an interesting debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene, and thank you for having me here. As Irene already mentioned, I'm not a politician. I'm just a sex educator and an activist. And I don't really write elaborate speeches or get to understand every meander of high diplomacy. So I'd like you all to just relax a bit. I know that we are at the Parliament, but just, you know, put your feet up for a bit, because I'd like to tell you a story. A really short one and hopefully not a boring one. But yeah. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom quite far from here. That kingdom has been at war for so long that there was no generation alive to remember the actual feeling of freedom. There was no princess, no prince. But there were people there, and oh, what people they were. Strong-willed, courageous, willing to sacrifice themselves for those to come to have a safe homeland. After many years of fighting, they finally regained their freedom. The joy was almost overwhelming, but when the euphoria of victory has toned down, it turned out that they had no clue how to rule an actual free country. There wasn't anyone who would know what it means to participate in this new world, so they turned to their legends and history for inspiration. Ever since then, new rulers come and go with new visions and ideas based on the times that are long gone. Every good story needs a turning point, and this one happens to have one. And our turning point today is October 25th, 2015. That's the day that everything has changed. As you probably understand, that mysterious country is actually Poland, and just a little part of our history. But what actually happened in Poland on this very day, a bit over 2 years ago? We have elected a new government, and now the ruling party is probably known to some of you, Law and Justice. We shifted from centrist to very social conservative, Eurosceptic, and with the church's influence, the strongest in a long, long time. The switch left many to shock. The Law and Justice started realizing their promise of bringing the country a so-called good change. And that cryptic phrase turned out to be traditional, phobic, and close-minded vision of a nation. Not to look far, let me mention the matter of availability of abortion. I'm sure most of you already heard about the well-known black protest which shook the world, actually, not only our nation, but the world, just a bit 2 years ago. You see, it turned out that the black protest matter wasn't only the matter of abortion, it was just a prelude. One of the most important reforms to be conducted by Law and Justice is a new educational bill, restructuring a big part of our educational system. It provides schools with new core curriculums, among other things. Now, the closest thing that Poland has to sexual education is a subject called preparation for family life. The person responsible for the new core curriculum for the subject was Professor Urszula Dudziak. She's a psychologist and theologist closely tied to the Catholic Church. She has officially stated that, and I'm quoting, "Women need sperm in order not to develop cervical or breast cancer." That's one thing. The second one, using condoms is a sign of immaturity in a relationship. Or, to be more exact, using any kind of contraception deprives its users of dignity. And these are official statements, like governmental and educational statements. The new curriculum she was responsible for creating consists of statements such as, "One of the main goals of the following document is to raise awareness and provide arguments for preparation for marriage and starting a family." Another one is, "The students are expected to list biomedical, psychological, social, and moral arguments for sexual initiation and matrimony." And finally, "The students are expected to judge the use of contraception on the grounds of morality." In her textbook for preparation and family life, and that's actually curious because That one book was published before the change of the government, so with our previous government. There is a quote saying that young girls should not visit a gynecologist on a daily basis, for it's not a dentist office and there is no need to get checked up regularly at such a young age. The curriculum's main focus is on matrimony and starting a family, but that's not all, really. It states that it's crucial to strengthen the student's identity with sex assigned at birth, but there is no mention of transsexuality or not even gay or lesbian rights. To be more precise, there is no mention of LGBTQI+ whatsoever. I'd like to remind you that Poland is already a country with one of the highest intolerance rates in Europe, unfortunately. It doesn't look any better when it comes to relationships and consent. According to a study published by a Polish non-government organization called STER, 25% of Polish women suffered attempted rape, and 20% are survivors of such act. 20%. That's 1 in 5. Unfortunately, not only does the new curriculum ignore the problem, but the government is actually cutting funds to the NGOs working with the victims of sexual and domestic abuse. There were also plans of dropping the Istanbul Convention altogether, which was compromised by several ministers. Our tale, the Polish tale, is not a particularly happy one, to say the least. We not only lack princesses, dragons, and magical cottages made of gingerbread, we miss comprehensive sex and relationship education, among many other things, obviously. But unfortunately, both options, the dragons and the education, seem equally impossible in today's Poland. We are the ones, and I'm speaking to Youth Forum, whom I'm a part of, we are the one who can fight for the better future. And it's true, there are many obstacles to overcome: right-wing extremists, phobias, anti-gender, anti-choice movements. But for what it's worth, I strongly believe that we are the heroes of this fairy tale. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonina. I think that a lot of us are shocked, actually, by your report, particularly about the horrible statistics around sexual violence against girls. And again, to me, it shows that it's such a human rights violation that is completely irresponsible to ignore, not only in your country, but also from this house, as turning, a blind eye when you have 20% of girls who are victims and survivors. It's mind-blowing. But okay, now we go, and I can introduce with great pleasure Jad Amin Zaitouni, and again, sorry, you will have to repeat your name because I'm very bad at pronouncing. He is coming from Belgium. It's a law student of the Vrije University of Brussels, and he's been very active in youth organizations, and also in he has participated in the United Nations and European Union and youth parliaments, so he's very savvy around the politics and how to discuss issues, and incredibly feminist. Let us welcome Jad.
Thank you very much. Dear members of the parliament, dear guests, dear friends, dear whoever is out there watching through their computer, 21st century. My name is Jad Amin Zaitouni, and recently I had the opportunity to go to Uganda. And Uganda, a beautiful country, well, the government there actually decided to make sexual education non-obligatory. What we're looking at right now is basically there, at the moment, 1 out of 5 women that are 18 years old are either pregnant or have a child already. 1 out of 5. Right now, young women there believe that salty water is an answer to STDs. It keeps going, the list is huge, and no matter how you look at it, the statistics are clear. The reason why I start with this story is basically not so that we can look down and think of how bad it is in Uganda, but so we can all remember the importance of sexual education. Because if anything, we should learn about it. In Uganda, there are 1 billion barriers to sexual education. We have none here in the EU. We have no reason not to have decent sexual education. Recently, for example, the Polish Prime Minister said something in the lines of, if Poland has to be the last stronghold of morals in the EU, then Poland shall be. let him have fun, let him play True King of the North, whatever. Sexual education doesn't have to be against any moral. It's just clear facts. It is ridiculous that a 12-year-old sister of a friend of mine in Nairobi, Kenya, has better sexual education than my 18-year-old female friend in Poland. It is ludicrous that I have met young women in Havana, Cuba, with better knowledge of their bodies than my sisters here in Belgium. And now here we are, and I believe we are somewhat the more progressive side of politics, everybody here present, or we're going to consider ourselves that way. And that's great. We get to feel like we're progressive. We get to feel as if we're the good guys, right? We get to talk about empowerment of young women, gender equality, equity, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and it all sounds great and amazing. But how can we talk about any of it without talking about sexual education first? How can we talk about empowering young women when we first don't empower them in their sexual relationships? When young women don't even know their own bodies? How can we even start thinking about sexual and reproductive health and rights? When basically even today I went outside during a break because a female friend of mine was asking me about moon cups and if the pill she took, it was still valid. I'm a 24-year-old man explaining to my female friends about it. And that's the saddest part actually, because even today somebody told me about how great Belgium is doing. And 2 years ago if you had told me that, I would have laughed. But now as I've done more with sexual education, I realize Belgium is actually indeed. In the EU, Belgium is considered definitely top 5, and it's not even that great. So then we have to look at the rest of the EU and wonder somewhere, right? So let's quickly focus on Belgium. In Belgium, to give you somewhat of some information about the situation, we look at sexual education like through two aspects of it, basically. You have the actual sexual biological education, this is the hard scientific side, which I believe is actually quite good in Belgium. And then there's a second part, which we call relationship education. I think it's somewhat similar in most countries. And there we're going to talk about what sex is. And from what I've gathered from friends and from my own experiences, is very often it goes wrong in two possible ways. Either we go and pretend that sex is some physical stoic thing, just like the most basic social interaction, as if I would shake your hand, where obviously when you're young and you're 14 and it's your first time, there is more that comes with it. Or we go the complete opposite direction and we're going to talk as if sex is this monogamous, heteronormous happening with a huge moral impact and we have to think a billion times before basically having sex. And there seems to be never a decent middle way. So this is Belgium, one of the better countries. I think there are two key things that should still be better, even in Belgium, which is, first of all, indeed, the psychological dimension of sexual education, but also the term consent. It doesn't come up as often as you would think. While we find it very normal and very logical, the mere phrasing to young children, telling them that sex is this consensual thing, and not just consent as in saying yes. Now we're talking about the consent of being comfortable with it and making sure that your partner is as well. It seems so logical, yet it doesn't actually happen. And so recently I read a very interesting article. The article, the title was, a very great title, "The Female Price of Male Pleasure." And the very relevant part of that article was that a part of it was about how basically the writer interrogated many women and men across the whole world. And if you ask women, and that's like just an average, right? What is good sex? Women will tell you it was kind of comfortable, it was nice. If they get an orgasm, it's actually great sex. And if you ask them what is bad sex, it's going to be, it was painful and actually quite awkward. If you ask men, however, what is bad sex? My sexual partner was just laying there, it was a bit boring. If you ask them what is good sex, oh, she was crazy, she was fun. If you ask them what is great sex, they're gonna basically give you a porn movie. This discrepancy is horrifying, but it's actually a hard reality everywhere, whether you're in Belgium, Italy, or Poland. And if you think it's not, well, if you already think it's horrifying, you have to look at the practical results of it. I'm going to give you somewhat of a more biology quick lesson here. It's what we call endometriosis. It's a condition that happens to 1 out of 10 young women. That basically means that there are 30 women here, 3 of you will at one point have endometriosis. What is endometriosis? Very briefly, it's, I'm not going to go too much in detail because of time. It's when a part of the tissue that grows on the side of your uterus basically starts growing other places as well. Now it sounds horrifying, you think, oh, 1 out of 10, damn it. Don't worry, you can very easily figure it out by going to your gynecologist and having certain symptoms. What are the symptoms? First and foremost, you have way more painful menstruation. Now that's not very practical because menstruation already hurts, so hurting more, you won't necessarily know right away. But there is an easier way. The second most common symptom is that penetration sex becomes painful and very discomfortable. You think, oh, that's great. Well, it's not great, but at least you get to know it, right? Imagine if cancer was that easy to figure out. Now, the average of time it takes to diagnose endometriosis is 5 years. 5 years it takes for women to realize that their penetration sex is painful and discomfortable. I want everybody here to take a second and imagine if there was an affliction that would cause the male ejaculation to be painful and discomfortable. What the average would be a day and a half. Our emergency services will be flooded with young men basically bonding over when they felt the pain. And the thing with an average is you always have to be somewhat critical, because the average means it's sad to phrase that way, but that's sexually active, more privileged in the sexual aspect women who are used to having good penetration sex, right? They're gonna have penetration, they're gonna think, oh shit, something's wrong. No, whoa, this hurts, I don't want to, whoa. And they go to the gynecologist, and no problem, they figure it out real fast. But for all these women there's a huge amount of women through the whole of the EU that's gonna take maybe 10, 15 years for them to realize. And this starts already in sexual education. How ludicrous is it that women don't even think about how it could be painful? It's like the standard. Again, 10 to 15 years for a huge group of women before they realize that sex is being painful and discomfortable. And that's actually a huge problem. I'm just giving one example right now, but basically it is a huge health hazard as well. So many aspects of sexual education are not being handled correctly. Oh, apparently we don't have that much time, so I'm going to try to jump very quickly through it. But the thing with averages is indeed, you have to be critical. And on average, the EU is doing quite well, right? You'd think the EU, we're great, we have great sexual education, low teenage pregnancy, etc., etc. However, that's the thing with averages, you have to look closer. And if you go, for example, to Italy, averagely not that great. But if you're in Milan, great liberal city, you actually have quite an okay sexual education. But what if you go to the villages? What if you go to the more conservative religious cities? It's actually horrible. Young people having no idea whatsoever. And I don't want to make the link that by default conservatism or religion is against sexual education. If anything, that's not even true. You shouldn't be making enemies on sexual education, because it's a common goal, even in the most heteronormous, what we believe probably disgusting conservative idea of a healthy relationship and a healthy situation for children. Okay, you want to avoid young teenagers having children when they're not ready? Great, teach them about sex, teach them how to avoid pregnancies. Even in the biggest taboo of politics, abortion. You want to avoid abortion, non-medically, very often unwanted pregnancies, teach young people how to not become pregnant. So it's not that you have enemies even on the other side of the political spectrum, it's common good. And either way, we have to accept the current reality, right? 21st century, whatever dirty, kinky sexual video you have ever seen in your life, I guarantee you, your 14-year-old kid, during his lunch break or her lunch break, is gonna find a dirtier, high quality, high definition, kinkier porn than you have ever seen in your life. That's a harsh reality. And if we do not teach young people about sex, they will teach themselves. They'll go on their phones, computers, and they'll ask their teacher Pornhub to teach them about sexual education. I highly doubt whatever left idea of sexual education, I highly doubt is gonna be worse than Pornhub. And so, wait, I'm going to run it up, right? For my final call is actually to the MEPs here. Do not underestimate the importance of sexual education. Because yes, you represent the people of the EU, but more than that, you represent the dream of the EU. And the European dream comes with essential democratic values, including the empowerment of women, including gender equality. And all of it can only exist through sexual education. So if you want to talk about empowerment of young women, you want to talk about gender equality, you want to talk about how we should give more to ensure equality, equity, then you gotta talk about sex, baby. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jad. We feel the passion and the feminism in your speech. Thank you very much. But let me give the floor now to Ivona Miletic, who's coming from Croatia. She's the vice president of our local Social Democratic Party. She's the vice president of our local Social Democratic Youth Forum, and she's a member of City Council and a mother.
Good day, everybody. Well, I will tell you something about sexual relationship and relationship education in Croatia, but also I would like to refer more on what happens when we have a lack of sexual and relationship education, as well as gender equality awareness in childhood, what happens later on in the future, especially in politics, since that's my field. So sexual and relationship education represents not only a big challenge in Croatia, but is also a problem. Systematic sexual education does not exist in Croatian schools and has never existed in the history of Croatian schooling. What Croatian schools are offering are fragmented information, most often within subjects such as biology or religious science. if there is a goodwill on the part of the school principal, certain teachers, and medical experts, if all of them come together, some students might be lucky enough to attend some form of a one-day lecture during their 8 years of primary school or 3 to 4 years of high school. There have been attempts by the former government of Social Democratic Party of Croatia to implement sexual and relationship education as a part of regular schooling. However, that attempt encountered great clerical resistance, followed by mass media disinformation about what sexual education actually is. Up to this day, very few adolescents have learned about human sexuality through their high school education, where the content was solely informative and did not affect behavior. Religious classes, which are meanwhile mandatory in Croatian schools, may also mention human sexuality. However, that is exclusively in the context of religious dogma and within the marriage relationship. This is shown in Croatian everyday life, in our politics, political campaigns, commercials, and even media. Even though we have some great examples in our politics, such as Biljana Borzan, she's a successful MEP, she's in the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats, member of ENVI, the member in FEM, and a doctor and also a mother. There are some examples that are not so bright. Some Croatian politicians are against ratification of Istanbul Convention, and also current government of Croatia, led by the Conservatives, is avoiding ratification of the Istanbul Convention in the Croatian parliament. Reasons for this may lay in the fact that the biggest part of their electoral body are members of Catholic Church, who is against the Istanbul Convention, as they see it as an invasion of their dogmas. Therefore, we can say that the Catholic Church has a big say and a big role in this in Croatia. Less than a month ago, when asked about a case of domestic abuse in which the abuser was one high-ranked Croatian official, where the abuser's wife dropped charges after being systematically ignored for 2 years by his party's members, the Minister of Demography, Family, Youth and Social Policy said that the abuse complaint should have been resolved earlier within the family, because this is how the dynamics in the families are. So for our Minister of Family, Demography, Youth and Social Policy, domestic violence is just one of the normal, everyday things in families and should stay inside the four walls. Meanwhile, the newest statistics have shown an increase in domestic abuse, especially one directed towards women. Each year, between 11,500 and 17,500 perpetrators of domestic violence are being reported. Each year, there's between 14,500 and 22,200 victims of domestic abuse. Around 75% to 80% of victims are women, and each year between 90 and 150 cases of rape are being reported, which is a big number when it comes to a small nation as Croatia. We are only like 4 million in state. Bear in mind that Croatia in some places is still a very traditional state in which the accent is on patriarchal system in the families. Man is the head of the household and woman has to be submissive in order to be a good woman. Women are instructed to be less vocal, less powerful, to be silent. Therefore, the real numbers might be even higher. Women are taught not to talk back to their husbands or fathers until it's too late. Between 22 to 45 women are being killed each year in Croatia. Up to 65% of their killers are their current or ex-partners. In the entire Croatia, there are only 16 safe houses for victims of domestic violence, which is less than a number of Croatian counties. Local governments allocate between 0.1 and 0.6% of the entire budget for the victims of domestic abuse. the sexual and relationship education should not only be important, but should also be a priority for all those who hold office in Croatia, and in order to better our state, give our citizens the much-needed sense of security and protection, and to minimize the amount of violence, sexual or any other. Croatia lacks a program that will not only prevent domestic and sexual violence, but also a program that will give victims the needed psychological help, protection from the abuser, and a safe place, as well as the hope of a happy life after the violence. When it comes to equal representation of both women and men in our politics, yes, we do have all the laws. We even have a woman as the president of the state. However, majority of women usually find themselves at the bottom of election lists, just satisfying the legal form of 40% women on each list. One city proudly announced on their official Facebook page, like a month ago, that their deputy mayor is pregnant. They congratulated her and then stated, I quote, "In the future, we should elect only men as mayors and deputy mayors because they cannot get pregnant and therefore they cannot go on pregnancy leave," on their official Facebook page. Well, in the year 2017, on 10th of February, I became mother. 1 month later, the president of my party called me and said, "I want you to be our candidate on the next elections as my deputy." He was a candidate for the majors, therefore I was a candidate for deputy major. I was truly honored by this proposal, so as we got into election campaign, I started to hear comments from everywhere, but sadly mostly from women from my own party, saying, "And what about her child? Isn't she supposed to be focused on being a mother and on her family?" Well, luckily my colleagues thought that I could do both. I thought that I could do both, and I did both. Well, actually, my son and I did both, since when the campaign started, he was like a month and a half old, 2 months. So we did it all together. I will show you just parts, so you can know you can do it all together. This is him when he was 1 month and a half old on his first International Women's Day. This is us on campaign. He's there in white, small one, giving flowers. Red flowers. This is all during the campaign, reading the newspapers about our campaign. He was there all the time. As you can see, the strollers are everywhere. This is him with the minister, the major, and other candidates. With the president of our party, some of you know him, Davor Bernardic. He was here even giving for anti-cancer campaign, selling flowers, protecting the old building in our city. On my graduation and today. So what I wanted to say with this is that at the end of the day, even though we didn't win the elections, we missed it by some 2,000 votes. I'm a member of City Council. I'm a vice president of my party, human rights activist, women rights activist, and if I may say, a pretty awesome mother. I guess, after all, we can do everything and be everything while being successful in all fields and aspects that create our life. And I personally didn't even start yet. I want you to know that nothing stops you from getting whatever you want to get. And even I hope that in the future, when my son grows up, the thing that that he won't have to live in the society as we do live in. That the question of being a mother or having a career won't exist. And I hope I will be his example for this. I want you to think always about two things. Feminism isn't about making women strong. Women are already strong. It's about changing the way the world perceives that strength. And also, we cannot all succeed when half of us are being held back. Thank you.
Okay, I can see that we have a notion of passion here, and that's really encouraging. And thank you, Ivona, for raising a lot of very important aspects around the situation in Croatia, around the situation of women in politics and perception of women in society, but also around a very heated, sad debate, and that's a debate around the Istanbul Convention and the fact that some forces are ready to sacrifice half of the population on the altar or of their ideological beliefs, and that can really abandon women to violence. But like we'll have a whole new generations of activists, I'm sure, like your son. Okay, let me give the floor to Chloe Kenny from Ireland, because she's a trainee here in the European Parliament in the Women's Rights and Gender Equality department, and she also has been studying European studies. But more than anything, I think she must be very, very, very sensitive to these issues, being an Irish, young, strong lady. So the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you for that. I'm Chloe, and it's very weird for me to be on the other side of the podium today. I've spent a year in the European Parliament, more or less, sitting in these seats back here. I don't think I've ever been behind the podium. I want to start with an anecdote story, just like Antonina, except mine may be slightly less poetic than yours. Has anybody seen the movie Mean Girls before? Yeah. So there's a scene in Mean Girls where they're in a sex ed class with the PE teacher, and the PE teacher's vision for sex ed is just yelling repeatedly, "Don't have sex, you will get pregnant and die." I mean, it's a joke. In the movie, it's played off as a joke, but the first time I saw it, I was 12 years old, 11 years old maybe, and I didn't realize at the time that that would be the entirety of my sexual education in secondary school. So yeah, just a basic background on the education system in Ireland. Whether or not you're aware of this already, Ireland is a super Catholic country, super Catholic. It's changing very, very slowly for many, many different reasons, but a good estimate of the number of Catholics in Ireland would be 90%. And as a result, 90% of secondary schools in Ireland, more or less, are operated by Catholic voluntary groups. So this means that technically, while the government can implement curriculum with regards to sexual and relationship education, the ethos of the schools must come first. So this means that regardless of what they must teach, it has to be Catholic above all. So just a bit of personal background for me, I am not Catholic, which puts me in an interesting position in Ireland because Ireland is so rural. Most people come from small villages, small towns where there isn't really enough of a concentrated non-Catholic population to run a non-Catholic school. So I had to go to Catholic school basically. And it was a total shock to my system because suddenly I had nuns for teachers and they were all making these weird symbols at the beginning of classes that I had never seen before. I remember asking my mom, what is this? What are they doing? I don't understand. So for the first 3 years, I think we had an hour of SRE every week. But most of what we actually learned was about things like alcoholism and hygiene and things like this. We never learned anything about contraceptives. We never learned anything about our own sexualities. We never learned anything about relationships. The closest I think we came to learning about relationships was a class where we were paired with a different boy in the class and told, okay, you're pregnant right now. What are you going to do with your lives? And so we had to plan out and budget how we were going to be, young parents at age 14. And it was just the notion in my brain it didn't make any sense to me. And so I thought I had this idea that it was going to become more progressive as I moved through school. And no, it never did. After the compulsory section of our education, they somehow seemed to merge sexual education with religion. Literally the same, they were one in the same class together under the title religion. I remember, for example, and this is something that I actually asked my sister who graduated only a year ago. I asked her, were they still doing this in the school? So for the class titled morality, there was a section of the class titled morality. We would watch anti-abortion videos. So these were American sort of propaganda-based videos that, it basically just taught all kinds of lies regarding abortion funded by American evangelical groups with horror music in the background, something out of the 80s. And, you know, we would ask the teachers questions about this, but their own beliefs, their own Catholic beliefs, had to take precedence over everything. My sister told me that she asked a teacher at one point, what do you think about women who were raped and then become pregnant? What should happen in this sort of circumstance? And the teacher, who was a science teacher, a biology teacher and a religion teacher, the teacher replied, well, if it was my daughter, I would think it's a gift from God. And I mean, this is a few years ago. This is 2 years ago at the most, in a school in Ireland. Because the ethos has to take precedence, unfortunately, the Catholic Church will always take precedence. And it also comes down to Irish laws as well. I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of the 8th Amendment to the Irish Constitution. Yeah. So this was an amendment voted on in 1983 that basically guarantees the right to life of the unborn child. So this was even up until 3 years ago, this was even in cases where the mother's life was in danger. But because of this amendment, this has meant that the teachers weren't actually allowed to address abortion in schools. So we were told this repeatedly. I remember having crisis pregnancy groups come in to talk to us when I was maybe 16 or 17 years old. And we were warned before they came in, legally they are not allowed to speak to you about abortion, so don't ask them about it. This is in Ireland in 2010, 2011. We were explicitly told, don't ask them, they're not allowed to talk about this. And this is an issue this has been an issue in Ireland since the 1980s. Our first female president, Mary Robinson, she defended a group of students from Trinity College Dublin who were taken to the European Court of Justice in 1989 because they provided in the student handbook a list of numbers of charities that would facilitate abortions in the United Kingdom. They were taken to the European Court of Justice for this. It's one of the reasons why I'm such a passionate fan of Mary Robinson. The fact that she defended them regardless of her position as president is amazing. But these issues continue in Ireland. So this year, for example, UCD, which is the biggest university in Ireland, elected their student president, whose father was a member of, no, he's the president of the Iona Institute, which is a Catholic, it's an extreme right-wing Catholic organisation operating in Ireland. They're extremely right-wing, anti-abortion, anti-LGBTI rights, anti-everything. And for some reason, the UCD students elected her, the president's daughter, to be president of their student union. And basically, so again, when she was putting together the student guidebooks, she removed, without the consent of anybody else in the student union, she removed pages relating to information on abortion. She was impeached for this because she did it without permission. But it just strikes me as interesting that we still have the same issues that we had in 1989 regarding informing people on abortion. Okay, I'm going over time as well. So my speech, I have not written it down in case you can't tell because I had it written 2 days ago. And then our Prime Minister, our Taoiseach, called a press conference on Monday night to announce that we will have a referendum on abortion rights. Yeah. At the end of May, early June. I mean, I'm really, really scared for this, to be honest, because we also had a referendum on marriage equality in 2015. And it was brutal, it was dirty, it was really upsetting to see the posters that were everywhere, all funded by American evangelical groups, by the way, I have to say. And so I'm really scared to see what propaganda is going to come out during the campaign for this referendum. But I have to say, so 5 years ago, as I mentioned, they changed the laws on abortion so that if the mother's life is in danger, she can now abort the child. But it was an extremely contentious issue. It almost brought down our government. We lost several ministers, and it was extremely contentious. This was 5 years ago. It's just incredible to me that 5 years later, we have our Taoiseach, we have our Taoiseach, we have heads of even the most conservative parties now standing up and saying, okay, we support repealing the 8th Amendment. We support, you know, restricting, we support the 12-week mark. It's really extraordinary to me. And I was going to call on the support of MEPs to ask Leo Varadkar to call the referendum. I can't do this anymore. Now all I can ask from you, from any NGOs, from anybody here in this room, all I can ask is your support, because we really, really need it. The no side is going to be strong and we really need this. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chloe. Let me now give the floor to the very patient, lovely Catalina Stefanescu, who is our last speaker, and then finally also the possibility for the audience to ask questions. Catalina is from Romania, and she's the vice president of the Young European Socialists. And also, despite her young appearance, she has already served as a member of the Romanian Parliament from 2012 to 2016. So please tell us more about your experience in education and sexuality and relationship education. Thanks.
Thank you very much. At the beginning of my intervention, I want to tell you that I appreciate very much the ideas, the opinions, and the information that we heard here today. And my personal conclusion is that we have a lot of work to do from now on. Even though I'm not really an expert on sexual education, I want to share with you how I learned on my own way that education can really change the world and destinies. When I was a child, I always spent my holidays in the countryside, and near our house lived a family with a lot of problems. The parents were alcoholics and with poor income to support and raise two children, a boy and a girl. The boy had a handicap, he barely walked, but he was very smart and very passionate about electronics and IT. Every summer for 2 months, I helped him with homework and with overdue examinations. His grades were very low during the school year, and he wanted to quit school for several times. The fact that every summer I helped him to keep up with the school curriculum kept him going, and in the end he managed to finish high school and after that a school of crafts in electronics field. Now he owns a shop of electronics and he has a wife and 2 kids. He was the only one from his family who really got out of that environment. His parents are dead because of alcohol consumption, and his sister is a teen mom and an alcoholic. This is how I understood that the only chance we have to change the world is through education, and sexual education plays an important role in the normal development of an individual and, of course, of the society. What is different in sexual education, in my opinion, is that everybody needs it. Kids need sexual education, parents need it, teachers need it, even the mass media needs to be more responsible on this topic. Sexual education is not only about sex or the human body. It's about health, about emotional relations, and about responsibilities. I saw some statistics. Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland are all among the EU's worst when it comes to young adolescent mothers. From the Western Europe countries, the worst is UK. This is happening here under our eyes. It happened slow. Okay, I know we are. This is happening under our eyes, and it actually happened under my eyes in high school, a very good high school, by the way, the best from my city. A friend of mine got pregnant in the last year of high school. Now, after 10 years, she's a doctor with a 10-year-old son because her family supported her. But I remember the first 2 years in that period. She needed to stay home. She dropped high school, and of course she went to college later on. She was actually lucky because she had her family support. But what happens with the ones who are not that lucky? Problems appear regardless of the family you came from or of the financial situation. So we need to be proactive. We need to play more of a role by sharing best practices and fostering school education programs that increases respect and awareness on this topic. Sex needs to stop being a taboo subject or a cool subject. It needs to be associated with, in adolescents' heads with the word responsibility and health. We had another situation in Romania, in Cluj-Napoca, which is a very developed city, where at the prom, boys and girls lined up and imitated oral sex with bananas. They posted this video on social media because they thought it was really cool. The prom was actually organized by the parents' committee, so it's not the teacher's fault this time, it's the parents' fault. I think this is a good example to see how even in the, because Cluj-Napoca is really a very developed city, how in high society you can see problems caused by lack of sexual education. We have sexual education in Romania, but it's called education for health. And it gathers more things, not only sexual education. And that's why I think a good way to reduce these incidents is to advocate for sex education. Young people talking with young people about real issues and real life. I think this kind of discussions works better than an official one with the teachers directly. I think young people should be advocates for this subject and bring it in schools, in social media, in the parliaments, and on television. Actually, as YES Vice President, I proposed with our Education Network Coordinator to have some seminars and meetings in Romania, Albania, Macedonia, and maybe Bulgaria as a starting point on our common effort to change these things. Also, back home, I had several discussions with our government to create a legal framework for young advocates to hold seminars in schools on sexual education. And actually now after this seminar, I want also to borrow some ideas from the Swedish model that the Professor Olson presented here, which is actually really good. That's it. I was really quick.
Thank you very much. Very appreciated. By the way, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that we have a lot of nice material in display at the entrance as well as in the back of the room. Please serve yourself, help yourself, because you can really find a lot of useful information there. So thank you for being so patient. I'd like to ask if you have comments, if there are things that surprised you, challenged you, or that you feel burning need to add to this conversation. Please raise your hand and let's start a dialogue. Can you use the microphone, yes, and introduce your name and the organization you're coming from, country you're coming from?
Okay, I'm George. I'm from the International Falcon Movement Socialist Educational International. And I was wondering how we, as an NGO in Brussels, can influence decision makers on this topic.
Perfect question. Okay, I will collect a few comments and questions, and then maybe we can answer. And of course, the parliamentarians who are in the room, I think they're most welcome to answer as well. But first, let's hear a little bit more from the audience. Do you have comments or questions?
Hi, I'm June from the ACP Young Professionals Network in Brussels. I have a comment, and my comment is on human body parts, and just as an encouragement. From our organization standpoint, we deal with youth from Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific regions. And of course, in those areas, sexual education is not so easily undertaken. It is happening, it is forthright, but when it comes to things like abortion rights and LGBT rights, that's a different topic altogether. But when it comes to sexual education and relationship rights, especially for young girls and for women, there's a trend now that maybe we could share with you of teaching girls to be specific on their body parts, and especially young, he had mentioned grade 1 to 3, and one of the things is with young girls are being now told and taught about their privates by specifically calling the parts by their scientific names. So for example, for a girl, she would know, a girl of 2, 3 would know what the vulva is, so that when your child who's 2 or 3 comes and tells you, Mommy, somebody touched my vulva, there's no confusing where that child was touched. It is very specific, very exact. So if we could teach kids to be specifics, because it's not words they're just going to use as play, no, but if you're teaching a child to say, they touched me here, it's for sure not talking about the groin region, talking about the breast. They are very specific. So if we can introduce at a young age to accept our body parts and call them as they are, therefore sexual education and areas of consent will be easily accepted at teenage level. Thank you.
Thank you, wonderful contribution. I think there was another request there. No? Still from the first row then?
Oh. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for really wonderful presentations. I just wanted to ask first Hans about, well, you started working on this a long time ago. So I wonder, what were the conditions of Sweden when you started working? Because I don't think it's the issue about knowing the right curricula if you want to teach about sexual and reproductive health and rights. It's more about having the conditions to do it. If we don't live in a secular society, how do you do that? Like in case of Ireland, like what were the conditions when you started and how difficult it was? Because Sweden is really extreme example of this. And one more question was, or a comment maybe to the situation in Poland. The reaction happened when there was an absolute ban to abortion, but the ban of abortion was there before. So the civil society...
It was actually almost every year or two. However, with the change of the government and some other actions taken by the government, the idea of total ban of abortion caused an outrage.
Yeah, but the anti-abortion, anti-abortion movement was there before, and there was not such a severe reaction of the civil society at that point. So until it had reached the point of absolute ban. So I was wondering, from your own experience, and I know it has raised a lot of international solidarity at that point, but sometimes it happens also in Croatia and countries like Ireland, that there's an issue before, but until it gets to that point where it's like complete ban, there's not a severe reaction. Like, not severe, but there's not a strong movement against anti-abortion.
Just the last question or comment, and I will give the chance to the panelists and to the MEPs to respond to the questions.
Yeah, mine was a bit of a question, a bit of a comment. Actually, I'm from Italy, and I can assure you the situation in Italy as it is still as it was. I mean, I never had sex education, and it's pretty much the case in all over Italy. But yeah, the question I would like to address a bit maybe with the people with experience in education, and also as a more general question, is about the backlash you experience when you raise this kind of question. Because maybe if you do very how can I say, very basic biological education, maybe you don't experience backlash. That's not the case actually in some part of Europe or in some part of European countries, maybe more conservative or more rural part of the country. But actually when you start to address the question of relationship, the question of LGBT plus people, then the backlash, in my experience, I was also involved in some project in education for LGBT plus people, the backlash was huge. It goes till that threat and all these kind of things. And this is a big question, because you can have amazing guidelines, you can have amazing governmental policies, but then if the educators and the teachers who should go do that on the field do not feel safe to do that, they are not going to do that. They are going to have very non-controversial discussion with the kids, which actually is not why we are here. We are not here to teach, not only to teach them very basic notion, but also to start a discussion on consent, on relationship, on gender, on structure in our society, and also on LGBT plus issue, which I believe it's a way in which the conservatives are like taking that way as a path to go against a more general approach against on gender and gender structure in our society.
Thank you very much for the very sharp question. I'm sure that several people will like to answer this question. I just would like to point out that not all conservatives are against sexuality education and relationships and empowering young people. We have to be precise. It's ultra-reactionary conservatives that think that way. Luckily, there are also some members of the moderates that don't share the same vision. But again, let us start addressing the question, and the first question was directed to our members of this parliament. So if one of you nice MEPs present in the room who would like to volunteer and answer to our Belgian colleague to know what I can do.
Okay, then I will start. And you are actually raising a very good point, because I can use this as an advertisement block for the action that we want to do later on. No, I think that what at least I feel here in this parliament, but also beyond this parliament, if there is no external pressure on things, nothing is happening. So for us, it's very important that there is civil society. We had a very big march last year on sexual self-determination in Brussels. I think that was a very powerful sign to have this in every single capital in Europe, on action days, to have demonstrations, to do photo actions, to write emails to parliamentarians, because it might sound very banal and obvious, but we get thousands of emails from anti-choice groups. And if there is no counterbalance of people who are saying, no, we want the parliamentarians to defend our sexual and reproductive rights, of course there is a certain bias in the debate. And also I think what is very important to have this European networking and to work on a European level, but to also go to the member states, because many of the topics that were raised today and many of these steps backwards that were taken, they depend on what kind of government they are in the member states. So it's also important to really look at what is happening in the national parliaments, to have a strong network there, and then to also talk to the governments and to the executives specifically, because, yeah, I think that this is what, if you want to call it, that the other side is doing a lot. So for us, it would be really important to have a very strong and very campaign and message-oriented civil society behind us.
I don't know if the other MEPs want to add anything.
No, I agree with what Terry has said, and I think in some countries it's very difficult. They're looking at some of in the panel there with the lack of political support. So, I think we also have to think about how at the EU level we can do some things, and we created, all of us, because we needed a platform to discuss these things and to be strong, and we are committed to continue that work. And I think we have done, great work so far. But we also need to see how we can facilitate, support between different countries, like Swedish women coming to Poland or young people coming to Poland to do workshops as an action or as a practical thing, and to make sure that we actually develop those solidarity actions as well. I think that could be one of the other steps we need to take. Thanks.
Okay, can I give the floor now to Hans, because there was a particular question for him about the situation in Sweden, and then to Antonina about the situation and triggering factors in Poland.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's not so easy to answer. It's short, but I will try. I know I have to. But anyhow, of course, it was a long debate before it became compulsory in Sweden in 1955. But at that time, the debate had been so, I would say, extensive, so it was an agreement already in the 40s among most politicians and most political parties that this is necessary. So, but I think, and when I started, I mean, it was already a big support. It has never really been questioned since then. By some politicians, yes, and by the Christ Democrats before, and it was, but not anymore. And it has a great support among teachers. I wouldn't say that any teachers today say it's not an important topic. But how, I think, well, there are some crucial things. I mean, in Sweden, it was also supported by teachers very early. Already long before it was become compulsory or mandatory in school, teachers started to give sexuality education, and different schools did it already. So it has already been implemented here and there. And I mean, that is a good way often. When we work internationally too, we say, well, there are always window opportunities. There are always people who are willing to try, because then you also give proof. I mean, you have a specific situation in Ireland, as so many schools are actually run by the Catholic Church. But to build support among teachers is one thing. And also the youth organizations were very active also to advocate for sexuality education in Sweden. And so I think that is one thing. And what I used to say also when we were working internationally, or especially in kind of developing countries, is we have to take a stand. I mean, it's always a choice. You have to take a stand in a way. Is it for or against young people? I mean, it's a little bit kind of extreme to put it like that way, but for me it is. I mean, do you really want to support young people? Do you want to support them in their development and socialization, etc., etc.? Then you have to take a stand for young people, and then you just have to be for sexuality education. I will just add one more thing, and I think that the support is greater than we might think of, especially among young people. We know there we have the support. They want this, and they want it in school. There are a lot of evidence for that. But also parents. Sometimes you say parents are a barrier. Could be, absolutely. But most parents support sexuality education if they understand what it means. So that is also a way of building support, I think. And I would say that the politicians in general are, I mean, they are not in line with what people like. They are not as courage as the will among parents and young people are. I would say that. So, well, we can discuss this afterwards if you want to, because it's complicated.
Thank you, Hans. Let me give the floor now to Antonina to understand what happened with the Black protest.
Thank you. I know we are short on time, so I try to just wrap it up. But yeah, addressing both your remarks, like the Mebs and Joanna, what happened in Poland is actually, in my opinion, we can't look at what's currently happening in Poland without taking into consideration our history. You have to know that we had tens or even hundreds of uprisings after we didn't even exist for 123 years on the map in the 19th century. And whenever we got our freedom back, somebody took it away and there was nobody to help us. So when you're a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 17-year-old learning about the next uprising and another uprising, and they were all lost and there was nobody to help us, we feel a bit helpless, I think, as a nation. And for us to protest, it has to reach the boiling point, as it did with the Black protest, because that was not only the matter of the Black protest, actually, not only the ban of abortion. We also have the matter of cutting down the Białowieża forest. We also have the matter of constitutional tribunal and judiciary actions. And it's so complicated, and sometimes when I talk to my friends, they say that they are not going to another protest because they are tired of protesting everything. Something's happening everywhere. It's not only the matter of reproductive rights. However, we have to say that our current government has strong ties to the Catholic Church, like the fundamental Catholic Church. So, for example, the government has cancelled the national IVF program, and they actually replaced it with NAPRO technology. And we are just receiving the first report. It came out, like, I think 2 or 3 days before I reached Brussels here now. So it turns out that every year we had 4,600 pregnancies because of the national IVF program. And right now we finished the first year of NAPRO technology program. I can take bets on how many pregnancies we had because of NAPRO technology. Like, please, take a guess. Really? 3 in a year. And that's the official governmental program. Because they are replacing science with beliefs. And that's what's causing outrage. Because Poland, we are seen as a Catholic nation, and we are a Catholic nation. However, our Catholicism is not really the church's way. People tend to say that I'm a Christian, but I don't go to church, and I believe in God, but not that God that they are trying to sell us. So what's changing everything's changing. After the change of the governments, it was a huge turn when it comes to almost every social matter. And that fact, connected with all of the things that I've already mentioned, caused such an outrage with the black protest, especially that you've heard about one, and there were actually two. There was a second one this year, but almost nobody participated because we are tired and because it doesn't make sense. People don't see anything to change. And if we, as Polish women and Polish girls and Polish activists, don't hear the words of support from abroad, because we feel like we are fighting a lost fight again. And we need your support. We need you to cheer for us and to say that we are here for you and with you and we support you. We need you guys, like everyone. And I think we're going to wrap it up right now because we're totally over time. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, there was a clear question around backlash. I think it's been partially addressed by Antonina, but if there are comments from others who want to talk about the experience of facing very virulent backlash and how they responded, they have a chance for 1 minute only. Or I will also like to respond to this as the senior lead on strategy and partnership of IPPF, because certainly the International Planned Parenthood Federation has some experience with backlash. No, but I want to give it. Sorry. Are there parliamentarians or others in the room who want to answer to the question that was asked by our Italian colleague around the experience they had on backlash when they were trying to promote sexual rights? No? Yeah?
Actually, Dražko Kostovski from IPPM European Network. I would like to invite the Croatia representative, Ivona Miletic. Maybe she could tell us a little bit more about that. You had a very good subject, zdravstveni odgoj, so healthy development. And you mentioned in your introductory speech that there was a backlash from the parents and from the teachers. So can you tell us a little bit more what happened with that subject? Because it was approved by the Ministry of Education, it was in the schools, yeah, and there was some kind of reaction from the parents.
Okay, so in my speech I didn't say that it was a backlash from the parents, but from church mostly. Okay, this is connected because Croatia is mostly Catholic nation. But anyways, we had problems with defining gender. We had problems, for example, parents even were against having their children vaccinated at the age of 14 against human papilloma virus, because they thought that with giving them that vaccination, that they give them allowance to have sex. For example, so they choose not to vaccinate their children. What happened with the zdravstveni odgoj is that it came on, we had a big campaign of disinformation, mainly from Catholic Church, about how we are. It's funny, it's weird to say that, but they thought that we are trying to promote LGBT rights through sexual education. And since we had, just before that, we had a referendum on definition of marriage, which is also one of the examples that marriage as same-sex marriage was not allowed in Croatia ever. And then when that referendum happens, that's what Jovana was saying, when that referendum happened, that's the time when all of Croatians gathered, and some of them were for defining marriage as the union between men and women, and some of them were for same-sex marriage. But what happened altogether is that people just stopped talking about it and stopped getting involved with in that, so church just took the role, and the whole idea of sexual education just stopped nowhere.
I just wanted to add something because I think it's important to remember that this backlash is really strong. That's why we also call this meeting the challenges to sexuality and relationship education. We know about the Mexico policy that has been introduced by the new administration of the US a year ago and the deadly cost of that for women around the globe. And that's all based about the same intransigent, fanatical misunderstanding of sexual and reproductive rights, of explaining and enabling and empowering people to have happy and healthy relationships free of violence. And it's extremely sad. And that's why I was showing at the beginning the poster around the cost to show to people here and on the internet and everywhere what is the cost of hypocrisy, what is the cost of denial of rights, what is the cost of social fears. We heard about the situation in Croatia, in Ireland, in Poland. I can even talk not only about Italy, which is my country of origin, but I can talk about Belgium, as that did, because I have two small children, a girl, fantastic, 6, and a boy, who's almost 4. And when she came back from school, from a good school, 5, she was telling me, Mom, a friend told me that the only thing he's interested in a little girl, c'est la zizette, which is a very cute word for female genital. I was shocked. Coming from a 5-year-old, I assume and hope that the male friends who were saying that don't understand, don't mean it, but there are yet thousands of years of sexism, of oppression that permeate the air. I'm talking about Belgium, I'm talking about a good school. There is this unwritten curriculum of oppression, of really social norms that are so harmful. And personally, I think that you have to remember, because I want something better for my child, for my daughter, for my boy. I don't want him to say these things. I want to teach him what to do if his male friends say these type of things. We want a different society, and we want the different society now. I don't want them to go to the immense amount of crap I had to go as a very lucky, white, educated, middle-class, young Italian lady. I took so much crap and sexual violence in my life, and that's enough. That's it. So, sorry for the passion. Sorry for that. But let me give the floor now to Terry and to Maria Arena, because we want to hear from the parliamentarians what they see, what they expect, and what they want for our society in the future.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Arena. I'm from the Socialist and Democrat group. We work together a lot on the feminist, but also gender equality. And it's really a pleasure to work with Terry and with Malin. I've seen her. Okay. Because we are really here inside the parliament, a very strong progressive movement to fight against violence, but also to fight for rights, because I think we have to have also a positive message to give to young ladies and young men in Europe. So yes, we are living in a very violent world, and women are more targeted than men. But also men are targeted, and certain type of men are targeted by this violence in this world. But we also have a very important right in our different laws in Europe. In some countries we have more than in other countries, and we want to use these countries as drivers in Europe to show that it's possible to have more rights and to live better than in other countries. For example, I'm working for this moment for the work-life balance, and work-life balance is really another type of violence that we are confronted to when you have to choose between your career and your family life or your life, your private life, it's really violent. It's something that it's make you feel very bad in your life. So we need to work in this work-life balance for women, but also for men. We met a lot of men saying that I want to care of my children, but it's not possible to do so because in my company it's not possible, in my society, in my country, in my family, it's not possible to do so. So we are fighting as women. So we want some men to support us, but we are fighting as women to have the paternity leave all over Europe. So not only we fight for women, but we also fight for men's rights because they need it. So I think perhaps sometimes we need to have more men with us, but it is the same thing when we are dealing about violence. When we are dealing about violence, we always are between women. The problem is that when there is violence between men and women, and if we just work with women being victim of violence, we are not working on the roots of this violence. And so it is really important also to have more men in this discussion. And for example, we will have a discussion today, I think it's at 5. We invite some women speaking about the different issues of women's equality, and I have a Belgian professor, teacher at the ULB, Université Libre de Bruxelles, and she wrote a book on de l'insulte aux femmes. And they are just speaking about the wrong words against women. And it began at the real beginning of your life. In French, when you are pregnant, and you said that you are pregnant and you are going to have a girl, they said it will be une pisseuse. Pisseuse is just a little girl, a little bit annoying, that will be not so funny that a man, that a young boy. And it begins just like this. At the beginning of your life, you have this kind of words, l'insulte, and it is really something really violent when you are mother also, and somebody says, oh, it will be a pisseuse. It's not a good feeling that you have for your children. So we will have this discussion, and we have had une exposition, exhibition, yeah, sorry. We will have an exhibition here in the Parliament with the name of this exhibition in French. I don't know how to say that. Yeah, in English there is a word is bitch. C'est salope, putain, salope, I don't know. So just to be provocative here in the Parliament and to say, yes, these different words are used by men, but also by women, and it is the beginning of the violence. This is the beginning of the violence. When you can use this kind of words against women in general, you agree that there is the beginning of the violence, and so we have to educate against this. We spoke about the sexual and reproductive rights. You know that when it comes to education, here at the European Parliament, we don't have the competence at the European level, to work on education. Education is a competence in the states. It's in name of the subsidiarity. So each member state has its own competence on education. So it's sometimes difficult for us to take politics and to take measures for education. But we can support measures on education and to guarantee education to sexual rights for young in different countries. But we also can destroy something that you have in some country. And for example, when it comes to austerity, everybody knows what is austerity. It's just to respect the budget of the country, not to spend too much money. This is austerity. But when countries are following this diktat of austerity, they are just cutting funds to the first line of health. And the first line of health is prevention, is education. And I must say, for example, that in Belgium we have a lot of planning familial.
Family planning.
Family planning, yeah, sorry. We have a lot of family planning, and they were the first targeted to have less money because of the austerity. So we have to join different issues. It is not to speak about women equality in the gender committee. No, we have to speak about that in the different committees, in the budget committee, in the European semester. It seems to be very far from our perspective, but in fact it is there. If you have no means to make education, to do education, to have sensibilization to young girls and men, if you have no money to do so, it is impossible to do. So gender equality is for gender committee, but not only in gender committee. We have to speak in econ, in budget, and in European semester about gender equality. And we need to have it in our priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. Now we can hear from Terry.
Thank you, and thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks to Irene and IPPF and all the wonderful speakers. For me, it was really, really interesting to hear all your insights. And I would also like to refer back to what one of the participants was saying, that we are facing a backlash in Europe. And I think we have to make ourselves aware of the fact that it's not only happening punctually in some countries. I think we have very well heard today about the situation in Poland, where there is again a law being discussed that is going to restrict the access to abortion even further. We have the example of Bulgaria, where the Implementation Act to the Istanbul Convention has been rejected in Parliament. We have to speak also of countries such as Germany, where just recently a doctor was convicted just simply because she gave out information about where women can have access to abortion. Also in Germany, just recently, an AfD parliamentarian who is openly anti-gender activist, who is LGBTI, who is going against LGBTI issues, has been appointed to one of the major foundations that is fighting against homophobia and transphobia. So we see these examples all over Europe. It's not only an Eastern European matter, and that's why I believe it's so utterly important to stand together, and education is absolutely key in this. And Marie's right, we don't have a direct competence from the European Parliament, but still networking and making sure that comprehensive sexual education and the right to sexual and reproductive rights are fundamental rights, and thus concern the European Parliament and the European Union as a whole is absolutely crucial. And I think we have many battles ahead. I'm not going to speak too long because I also still want you to take action today, but the situation in Poland is crucial. It's not over yet because we fought back last time. We still have another proposal that is in the loop at the moment. We have the situation in Ireland, where I think we can win a big fight if we win this referendum. So if you can tweet about, if you can spread the news about repeal the 8th, do so. This will be of great importance. And of course, we will also have to look ahead to the European elections 2019. Maybe the majorities in the next European Parliament are going to be different ones. I think we don't want that to happen. We want to remain a progressive majority in this Parliament. So also pay attention to this and fight for progressive parties who take progressive stances on sexual and reproductive rights to again gain the majority here in this Parliament. And lastly, I told you I want you to take action still. We have a couple of posters made where we put very basic statements on defending our rights. We would like all of you to take pictures with them and not only tweet and share them on Facebook, but also to directly address people like Franz Timmermans, like Vera Jourova, like people from your own national governments, and tell them this is not just something on the side, this is something at the center of the struggle for human rights. Take action on this and do not let the anti-choice movements grow bigger and bigger as we are seeing right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the hope. Thank you for the call for action. I hope that a lot of you will come out and stand and take pictures and support the initiative on social media, and that you will do during the elections, because we will watch it. Thanks a lot to everybody. Have a nice afternoon.